So welcome, listener, to today's episode of the Coriel Ortho podcast with me, Tony Wilkinson, consultant podiatric surgeon, foot surgery expert, and founding director of Coriel Orthopedic Group. Now, this is a podcast where we delve into everything surgical, medical, and health and wellbeing related. And I'm delighted today to be joined by my friend and PT, Darren Worrall, who works at Outclass Fitness in Retford. Now, Darren's not any old PT, he's my personal PT. And I must say that he has helped me significantly over the last 6 months. I've gone from being 12 stone 13 down to around 10 stone 13, so shed 2 stones in weight, and got me prepped for a high rocks training program that I undertook earlier in the year. So welcome, Darren.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
No problem. So what's really interesting about PTs these days is every time you turn around, there seems to be a PT standing somewhere. And I think social media has really exploded lately with PTs all over the place giving advice on different things. So what was your journey into being a PT and what really motivated you to get to that point?
Great question, actually, to be fair. My kind of journey with this started really young. So, you know, whenever I first got it, and even considering anything in this type of field, I was 13 years old, and like I never really done any kind of sport or anything beforehand. Yeah. And I remember I was with my dad once, and he just said, "Right, son, I think you need to get into something now." And this is kind of where it evolved into getting into kickboxing.
Yeah.
So kickboxing was very much my gateway into everything related to health and fitness, and through sport, which ultimately what young people should be trying to get engaged in is some kind of sport and being encouraged into that, which, you know, my dad very much done for me. So yeah, from the age of 13, I was fanatical about kickboxing. From that then, for my 15th birthday, I got, obviously a lot of kids want loads of different things, but I wanted a gym membership.
Yeah.
So it evolved from obviously doing kickboxing, and then I was like, what's the next evolutionary stage in that? And then I was like, right, now I'm involved in like weight training and all that kind of stuff. And it was fantastic. Like I went to like a proper spit and sawdust gym. Yeah. So the music was blasting. It was, yeah.
They're the best ones though, yeah.
Yeah, it was just one of them atmospheres that as a young lad, you know, I had such a good like entry point into this kind of world. And PT at that time was actually quite an up and coming thing. It wasn't particularly where I was from, you know, people just kind of dabbled a wee bit at it in terms of the career path element for it. It wasn't really that well established.
Yeah.
So then what I decided then whenever I was 15, like, because I've always been quite clear-headed in what I wanted. So I was like, right, I want to be a PT, but I want to be a PT that actually understands kind of what they're doing. So at the age of 15, I decided that I was going to go to university to study sport and exercise science. And yeah, so every kind of thing around that evolved into pursuing that kind of career. And I remember the first job that I ever looked at was a personal trainer on board a cruise ship. And it said like it was attractive because it was like first job would be 60,000, you know, you get to travel the world, blah blah blah. And then whenever I delved into what that would actually look like, it was basically a sales job, and you would train a few people here and there.
Did you sell insoles?
Wow.
Because every cruise ship I've ever been on sells insoles.
Luckily I didn't actually take the job, Tony, but it was the first kind of bigger career path outside kind of my hometown that I could have basically explored to do PT. But I did want from a very young age to kind of move away as well.
Yeah.
Because I just had this idea of like exploring the world, and kickboxing gave me that opportunity to be able to do that because I competed at quite a decent level, as you know. But then it came down the path of, as I say, down the sports science route, and I went to university, got a sport and exercise science degree, which I was very proud of because, as I say, I said as a 15-year-old lad that I was going to do that, and then I followed that through.
Yeah.
And then it was from being at uni and being surrounded by other kind of motivational characters, particularly the lecturers there, that actually got me thinking more and more about how much further can I actually go with this route. And it was just on an off chance while I was actually at uni that there was an opportunity that came up to do a wee bit of a work placement in the sport and exercise science labs. So I done 1,000 hours over the course of probably about 2 years of voluntary work placement, where I got to work with professional athletes coming from football, rugby, combat athletes, and triathletes as well. And the thing that was amazing about that is it really got me the practical aspect of the sports science that, you know, whenever you're actually at uni, a lot of the times you're just doing the theoretical, or you're doing a lot of like essay writing, presentations, all this kind of stuff. But to actually work with athletes one-on-one and do things like VO2 max testing, blood lactate threshold testing, hydrostatic weighing, you know, things that the general population don't really have access to. It just gave me a first-hand experience of like what that was like, and to be able to relay back, which was a pretty cool thing to do, to like the sports medicine guys that work for those clubs. I was actually able to interpret results and show them at this point, based on their heart rate data and their blood lactate threshold, coming out just post 4 millimoles of concentration, when roughly that they'd be able to stop this test, because the science of that never really lied. So anyway, I'm digressing, but that side of it really sparked a real interest. And then I thought, right, I'm doing this, why don't I explore further education? So then I done a postgrad diploma in strength and conditioning, and that again, that just reinforced my love for kind of getting into this industry even further. I decided then though that the clinical way of working, particularly for athletes, at that early stage of my career, probably wasn't where I was going to have the most impact. Whenever I was at uni, I had a real I suppose interest in physiology, human physiology, nutrition in particular, and I thought, from a general population perspective, I could probably have a bigger impact, you know, taking someone that's probably leads quite a sedentary lifestyle, and actually go from there to see how far we can kind of get, you know, and you can have a bigger impact on their life. So in essence, that's kind of my starting route. So I started as a 13-year-old lad, and I'm still doing it at 32. So.
Great stuff. So it's interesting because, I mean, I've exercised and trained all my life from a young age. And I've always probably been on a BMI scale, what would be classed as a kind of overweight, you know, and only just into overweight. But what's really interesting about BMI is everybody puts it down because they say, oh, well, muscle weighs heavier than fat, and the usual thing. But I think the vast majority of people kid themselves, because most people are not athletes. Most people are not 18-stone boxers and ripped. Most people are really overweight. And even though I trained, I fell into that trap of thinking that exercise could out-train what I was eating. So eventually I went to one of the other trainers, Neil, and said to him, come on, Neil, what is the secret to this? Because I'm seeing other people losing weight. I come here 4 times a week, but I'm not really shifting any weight. And he said, it's just diet, mate. That's all it is. It's just what you're eating. And he kind of struggled with that. So when I came to you 6 months ago, and I came to you primarily to do the High Rocks. So if anybody doesn't know what High Rocks is, they can look that up online. But it's a fitness race, which is really just blown out of all proportion at the minute. It's become so popular. And you said to me, what is your goal for doing this High Rocks? And I said, I want to be able to do it with no top on, because that seems to be a typical CrossFit type of thing. And I wouldn't have done it at that point, because I was about 2 stone heavier. I just didn't feel confident. And as we went through that journey and we've gone through the weight loss, I've actually been astounded at where I've actually got to. I'm probably now into the normal BMI for the first time in 40 years. And I suppose from a general population point of view, the mind boggles with options of dieting. So if you listen to these fitness people, you'll have someone telling you should do 5-2. You'll have someone telling you should do fasting diet. You'll have someone telling you should do this, that, or the other. And you can be completely confused. If somebody needed to lose weight, how do they do it?
That was a very big question, Tony, because I've got points to go back from the start. Whenever you, just to address the first point, whenever you said about BMI, really, really interesting, right? Because I think everyone, we all want, and me included, because like, you know where my journey is, hence probably the reason why you actually work with me in this way. We all want to validate where we're at in many respects, right? So if my BMI is going, or someone's heard, oh, well, it's okay because BMI is rubbish, or this is rubbish, or that's rubbish, it's easy to kind of throw it out. The harsh reality of BMI really is, unless you're an athletic population, so unless you are, say, a rugby player.
Yeah.
Let's say a rugby player
Yeah.
who's a
And most people fall into the normal distribution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're outliers.
Yeah.
Elite athletes are actually outliers.
Yeah.
Their BMI, they'd be like very overweight. They would be in the overweight, the obese category.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, that's whenever you have to use you have to go a bit deeper, and you have to look at body fat percentage and, you know, how much fat tissue that they've actually got, which whenever you look at them, there won't be much.
Yeah.
And that's more a correlation for that population group, or a more accurate predictor of their overall health.
Yeah.
Whereas 100% what you said, general pop, you know, it's definitely not something to be overlooked, you know, for general health. And unless they're actually engaging in physical activity, even more so. So the less physically active that you are, the more of a generalized metric that can definitely be used for. As you get more and more, let's call it like from a beginner to an intermediate to a more advanced trainee, then all of a sudden you'd actually have to look at different methods, because you might actually be carrying a lot more muscle in comparison. So then that would be the only main characteristic of that. Going to then the diet perspective, you know, it's really fascinating, because my head instantly always goes to, well, is it scientists always that are saying this, or is it someone that's looking to sell you something?
Yeah, normally there's a sales pitch behind all these things, isn't there?
Typically, or there's a book sale, or there's something coming off the back of why something's been extremely promoted. The harsh reality of all this is weight loss, let's call it fat loss to be more precise, is far less sexy than just following a 6-minute abs, or you know, or I don't know, like just completely keto or paleo or Atkins or whatever people want to like pull it into. Ultimately, whatever's kept you alive up to this point has been the nutrition that you've had. So why do you need a radicalized, dramatic change just to get a fat loss? Right. So for me, that's whenever it's the approach that someone takes is really important. So if you're actually looking for fat loss, in my opinion, what you don't go on is all guns blazing and go, right, this is the diet plan you're going to follow. This is that. You treat the person with empathy. Do you know what I mean?
The person has to be engaged, right?
Absolutely.
They have to be bought into it, to what you're doing with them.
If there's no level of engagement, it's never going to work. Of any strategy. Now, I'm not actually dismissing any of those methods that I just said, because anything that creates a calorie deficit, which ultimately all of them are going to be doing, there's going to be some form of restriction in these diets that are going to mean that you're not eating the amount and level of calories that you were eating before, right? So if we just assume that that's what's going to happen, absolutely fat loss is going to work. But then the thing that comes into play is people get so hung up on it. It's like, oh, it has to be 5-2, or it has to be this to lose it. And it's like, I have a multitude of clients that do multiple different methods to get to the same destination. But what I do constantly reaffirm to is this idea of a calorie deficit. Now, where the industry is going very skew with, but again, I think it's for likes and follows, is that people are looking for, it has to be fun, and it has to be not boring, and it has to be all this kind of like almost, let's call it unhealthy food, right? So in essence, people are doing all these cool breakfasts and lunches and dinners, and they're like, oh, look at this, and it's only 300 calories. But that is just a load of rubbish. That isn't even constituted as food. Now, the thing to bear in mind is that's not me demonizing things that aren't whole foods and going, you should only be eating whole foods. I think if we were to look at the optimal range, we all fall somewhere within that with our eating patterns. If you're in the terrible range and you go here, right, you're still going to smash it. If you're here towards the optimal and you change a bit, you're still going to smash it. The point is it doesn't have to be initially that real hard approach to it. But the key to it is there has to be some form of change. You know, what's that definition of insanity? Repeating the same thing over and over again and looking for a different outcome. You know, if you're not getting the results that you want currently, you have to explore why, and you have to probably be more honest with yourself about where you're currently at, because it was until the point that I did that for myself that I was able to actually own my situation and then make that positive impact. Whereas before, I was kind of kidding myself. I was like, I can still kind of train, I can still kind of get on with it, but I didn't have the level of integrity that a trainer should have, because everything that I was saying absolutely was factually true, but there was no real weight on it because I wasn't doing it myself.
Yeah.
Whereas everything now that I ask of any of my clients, I've wholeheartedly done it myself.
Yeah.
Which I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've found that with, you know, the kind of diet regime. So I don't really believe in the fasting or the 5-2. It's for me, it's calories in, calories out. And I think, you know, the best thing that I ever did was start to track my calories, because you don't know what you're eating till you know what you're eating.
100%.
I mean, people might snack on nuts, but, you know, a small palm of nuts, 25 grams of nuts might be 125 calories. So it's huge calories for a very small portion. And I found that, you know, I could still eat at 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night if I was working late, and have tea at that point and still lose weight, because I was still within that calorie deficit, and it wasn't an issue.
So ultimately with that as well, again, there's optimal and there's suboptimal things. So eating that late at night, you could argue, you know, that's not ideal from a digestive perspective of what you want to be doing if you're sleeping and winding down for the evening. However, if your circumstances dictate that and you're within that range, well, then it's fitting into a lifestyle that works for you.
Yeah.
I think that's the point. It's like everyone wants to be shoehorned into like, this will work for me or that. When in actual fact, you have to look at the person as an individual, because what I give for you to effectively work for fat loss might not be what the next person needs, because they're not quite there at that stage. You know, ultimately, I'm always trying to walk people towards the optimal range, right? The optimal types of foods, whole foods, right? So getting your protein, your carbs, your fat sources from whole foods. But if someone's psychology is such where if I was to say to them, you can never have a Mars bar again, right? Now, if someone tells me that I can't do something, I kind of think, right,
you're not gonna follow that advice.
Good luck. You know, because that's not the way that my brain works. But the way that everyone is very, very different. So you have to make sure that whatever you're doing for someone, it's very, very niche to them. It all follows the same principles. In essence, 100%, it's calories in, calories out. Where people sometimes don't get that right, though, is they're only looking at actually the calories in, really. So they're thinking, oh, I have 1,800 calories a day, right? But say you're in a sedentary lifestyle, a job where you're burning 1,500 calories a day. Yeah. You know, well, in essence, you're in a calorie surplus. You're probably going to put on weight from that. Yeah. And that's a harsh reality, because like we're told constantly about 2,500 calories for males, 2,000 for females. But do you know what? Those numbers were actually brought about at a time when we had far more physically demanding jobs. Yeah. You know, that's not so much the case anymore. And whenever I look at a lot of my population group of people, you know, the numbers can be significantly less than that they need to adequately lose fat and get us the same result. The big factor whenever I look at this is how people's energy levels are, right? So if for example, someone came in and I wouldn't advocate this, but they had 1,000 calories, right? That's all they were having, 1,000 calories. And their energy was through the floor. That's almost my initial way in of going, do you know what? You need more energy to be able to perform better in your day. Yeah. And I'll tell you this now, the single greatest thing that you can do is encourage people to move more to be in a calorie deficit rather than ultra restriction. Yeah. I was finding there was days whenever I was on my kind of weight loss journey where I was having 3,000 calories of food, which, you know, talking to anyone that's
a lot.
Right. Yeah. So talking to anyone that's in any kind of calorie deficit, they think that couldn't be a calorie deficit because they're only ever factoring in what they're putting into their body. Yeah. Where in actual fact, you know, we were talking about the sports science kind of background before, you know, and one of the things that I told you to buy was a Garmin watch, for the simple reason being is this thing is basically like human physiology on your wrist. Yeah. So it gives me things that are very useful. Sleep data, right? So the sleep data, if you're in a more rested position coming into your next day, your hunger hormones are actually going to be in a calm state. So leptin's probably going to be increased, ghrelин's going to be decreased. So ghrelин's the one that wants you to eat everything in sight. Leptin, if it's raised, that's going to basically suppress the appetite. So those hormones are going to be massively impacted by the quality of the sleep that you're having, right? So ultimately, if I can see on here that people are having good, rested, deep sleep, you know, they're getting adequate amount of sleep for them, because again, everyone's different. if someone came into me and they were on 4 hours sleep and I said, right, you have to get 8, it's unrealistic. You have to gradually build that up for that person, do what's optimal for them. But ultimately, having one of these things in your wrist, you can see the data black and white.
I've been quite surprised at how good the Garmin watch is. I mean, what I was shocked about with my own journey was how few calories I actually burn. So take a typical day where I was training, and it was Outclass Fitness. They put you through the mill in terms of training. I mean, it's not just turning up to the gym and just wallowing your way through it.
No,
it's an hour's solid training. Absolutely. And typically on my watch, I would burn somewhere between 300 at a really good session, 500 calories, which in some ways you think isn't very much. But when you put the whole day together, even with that sort of training, even if I went for one walk of 2 miles, I was probably hitting 2,400 calories, which is less than the 2,500.
Absolutely.
Which clearly, my deficit point really was about 1,700 when I knew I was clear. But at one point you wanted me to be 1,000 calories under.
Between 500 and 1,000.
So 500, so 3,500 calories a week is the minimum, because that's what 3,500 calories is, 1 pound of fat. And trying to hit 1,000 calories. So I had to then up the exercise levels. I suppose this brings me back then to musculoskeletal medicine, because one of the big problems we find in musculoskeletal medicine is people come in with injuries and they'll say to us, well, I'm putting weight on because I can't exercise. And I'll say, well, you need to lose weight to try and improve your injury, because they may not need an intervention. They might not need an operation. Mm-hmm. They may get better by themselves if they improve their lifestyle. And typically they will always say to me, well, I can't lose weight because I can't exercise. And I've started to say to people, if I was to take control of your diet and lock you in a room, I would guarantee you would lose weight, because I'm taking control of it. And that's all about taking control. I suppose that's the key, isn't it? Getting the diet right first in the formula and adding things in as you can.
I want to go back to a point you made at kind of the start of that, where you talked about the exercise, right? And I think, again, this is where a big factor, or where people get too wrapped up in exercise as a fat loss tool.
Yeah.
The exercise is to get you stronger, fitter, feeling vital, training for your high rocks, having these tangible goals whereby you feel motivated and inspired for life. That's why you should be training, right? To get stronger, fitter, live a better quality life. The thing then, whenever we look at exercise selection, right? So you said there that there was a variance of 350 to 500 on your watch, right? Now, more isn't always better. And the reason why I say that is the direction of that particular session might have been more strength-based. So cardiovascular training per minute of actual burning power, you will burn more calories, right? But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the optimum for maintaining muscle mass, right? So it's always about thinking, not every session do you want to be getting the most amount of calories out of that session that you physically can, right? But that's such an important point, because then where you get the majority of your calorie burn is from your basal metabolic rate and your resting metabolic rate. And then we go a step deeper into that. And what was one of the things that I said to you that we needed to increase? Your NEAT, right? Yes. So as you're in a calorie deficit, your ability to move, shiver, fidget, general movement typically diminishes slightly unless you put parameters in place to move more. So the idea with NEAT, which for me is absolutely a no-brainer, is if I can get you to physically move more in your day, that's going to upregulate the amount of calories burnt. Whereas, and that's a very suboptimal energy requirement.
So NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So walking,
moving's the key.
Anything, hoovering,
anything
that's non-exercise related.
Correct, but it's getting you up and moving, taking the stairs, at work rather than going on the escalator, all that kind of stuff. It's stuff that's literally going to get you to
you know what really surprised me about NEAT is that I started to set my Garmin watch when I cut the grass. And I'll burn 300 calories cutting the grass.
Exactly.
Which is just you don't think of that as exercise, do you? But if you're starting to think about your activity you need as part of that, that helps it. I suppose people.
But what's that made you do, Tony?
Yeah.
That made you get up and do it.
It did,
doesn't
yeah.
it? Because
well, the wife's happy because I cut the grass as often as it needs to be cut. You know.
But it's, well, you talked to me before about going out with a dog.
Yeah.
And dog walks in the morning.
Yeah.
That was something that wasn't really in your day before. Was it?
I mean, I made excuses about that, and I think that's what patients do. I think that's what people do. You make excuses about things. You know, I'm too busy at work.
Yeah.
I can't do it because of this. I can't do it because of that. I know. I get up.
How much more productive are you?
5:30 in the morning to take the dog for a 2-mile walk every day, and I've just become obsessed with that now.
Yeah.
In fact, I feel grumpy if I don't do it anymore.
But are you knackered whenever you do that?
No, not at all.
Exactly.
No, it makes me feel great.
So a mantra that I kind of have at the moment is this idea of energy creates energy. You get up, you do something in the morning, it sets you up for your day. Yeah. It's not this kind of depletion thing. It even leads into kind of the high rocks thing.
Yeah.
You know, if someone turned around to you and said, you're going to perform at your absolute best in a slight calorie deficit, you'd go, no way. But what was your target for your High Rocks event? What did you wanted to potentially get? Not that you got, but what did you want to get?
Well, in terms of
time that you and Emily done.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So I mean, I wanted to do it in sub 1 hour 15 minutes.
And what did you do?
I did it 1:12, which was a great. And I think, to be fair, we could have probably done slightly better than that, just because the running we paced out a little bit. You know, it's slower than we thought it, because we wasn't sure how we would cope with it. But I think if we did it again, we would, or when we do it again, we'll be able to beat that time.
I love that when, not if. No, it's good. But that's it in a nutshell. It's the idea of moving more.
So when a patient comes in then and says, "Well, I can't do it," what if you were taking that patient under your wing and they said, "Well, I'm injured because of this. I've got a bad knee, I've got a bad hip, I've got a bad foot, I've got whatever. I can't do the exercise." Where would you start them? What would you do with them?
If they give me every excuse under the sun that they couldn't physically do anything. So are you saying that every single training mechanism will be out of play, or
you'll always get those patients. You'll get some patients who, you know, maybe physically disabled as well. So there are other factors coming into play.
Absolutely.
And it's always about, you know the weight is a factor, and it's almost, I feel a little bit, you know, frustrated by the fact that I know I can't get the best treatment pathway because the weight is a factor. And it might be that, you know, they need a hip replacement and the surgeons told them that they need to lose some weight before, but they're in pain with their hip. So where do these people start? What should they do to try and get the best?
Ultimately, everyone has the ability to buy something like this.
Yeah, so a Garmin, so some sort of tracking mechanism. It's all about tracking and knowing.
Absolutely. Again, like what I said before, optimal from what I've seen. Like I've used Fitbits. I've used what else have I used? A few others, to be fair, of different tracking devices. And for actually getting a whole rounded approach to your actual health, the Garmin for me was probably the best. Not saying that Fitbit are bad. They're just they're not as good as these for that kind of recording data. So I would definitely say that's a starting point, looking at what they're actually putting into their body. Yeah. You know, if weight loss is, you know, what they need to be in a better position to go into that surgery, then 100% they need to be looking at what they're actually taking into their body and what's been burnt, and then simply get on a very, very small calorie deficit. Particularly if they're not exercising and they don't have a lot of active calories to be kind of drawn from, they don't want to be going too aggressive to start with on that calorie deficit. They definitely want a minimal amount, like 100, 200, and see what the body responds to with that, and see how their energy is. Because ultimately, if they're in pain and they're not feeling good in themselves already, they don't want to be maybe compounding that. But with having ultra low in calories if they're not moving a great deal. So that would be definitely a starting point. Would be
okay. So the key is then knowing what's going in and knowing what's going out. And if you don't know either one of those, you don't really know where you are. You think you know where you are, but you don't, and so it fails. So I suppose, you know, most people could look at you and say, well, it's all right for you. You know, you're fit, you're a PT, but you are probably the most authentic PT that I've met, because you have lived the problems of life. You have lived the weight gain. I mean, at one point you were 5 stone overweight. I mean, I must say, when you were training people 5 stone overweight, a few of us did say, you know, his brand might be suffering a little bit here, because, the end of the day, it's like going to an overweight dietitian, isn't it? You don't, people don't listen. So your personal training, where people are paying you personally to come and see you, that's got to have an impact. How did you change where you were at? So you find somewhere. So something obviously triggered, and you changed that. What did you do?
Well, I'll give a bit of the backstory to that. I'll clarify by saying first, my knowledge base is my knowledge base, no matter what I look like. And I think in this industry as well, I think too much of an emphasis is actually placed on how we look. Yeah. I wouldn't actually say that I'm any better. Well, I am better because of things that I'm doing, which I'll come to in a second. But I wouldn't say necessarily that I was a bad PT before, right? I would say I was actually a very good PT before, but the integrity part for me was probably missing because I wasn't living that experience. Like if I put my hand in my heart now and turn around to you and say, Tony, I want you to do this, whatever it is with your nutrition, it's because I wholeheartedly believe in it, and I've probably done it myself, right? So instantly there's that buy-in from you. Plus, because you've been a client of mine for, well, I've been training you now 8 years. Yeah. So you've seen these kind of journeys that I've been on myself. Obviously, going back to what you actually asked me, because I'm deviating off the point. So why did I get overweight this time in particular, right? I think if I go way back to being a kickboxer, right?
Yeah, because at one point, I remember there's some photographs of you and you were ripped.
Yeah,
I mean, seriously ripped. I mean, I remember me and Tracy my wife, looking at them online and going, flipping heck, have you seen Darren? He's absolutely ripped. And you went from that to being completely overweight. So complete contrast.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think at some point as well, that particular photo shoot that you're referencing, I done that in a good way, but I approached it exactly the same way that I approached all my make the weight fights, right? Yeah. So in combat sports, obviously, which is a good thing and a bad thing, you've got the ability to make the weight classes, you've got a better power to weight ratio, right? But what I didn't realize until recently is I was using that as a crutch. So I was basically, because I'm quite greedy and I've owned that, I was using that as, well, whenever I'm not fighting, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And then whenever I do fight, I strip it all back and be quite methodical on everything. But what I wasn't addressing there is the fact that I have a disordered relationship with food. Like I wasn't obviously eating in a way that was conducive to long-term health.
Were you just eating rubbish or too much?
Whatever I wanted, Tony. Yeah. Whatever I wanted. And whenever I talk about being greedy, so some of my clients will come in and they'll go, oh, I've been bad, which I don't agree with the term bad, but I've been bad. I've had like a McDonald's or something like this, right? And I'll turn around and I'll say, you think that's bad? Let's play top trumps. Yeah. You've had like a Big Mac or something. I could have 3 double cheeseburgers, 4 large chips, Coke, blah, 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 all that. But the point is that was my all or nothing kind of mindset. Yeah. And that was something that throughout the process that I'm going to talk about in a second, that's something I've majorly addressed. Now, the fat guy, right, is always in there.
Yeah, sure. And we've all got that. Yeah. We've all got that ability to slip into bad
complacency
habits.
Is the biggest downfall for most people. As soon as someone says to me, I've got this now, I think, but do you? Because I'm 7% body fat and I don't think I've got this now. Yeah. It's something you have to work at. You just keep plugging away at it. But anyway, going back to the real point. So in COVID, at the start of COVID, it was kind of like, oh, this is a holiday. This is all right, whatever. And then we took a bit of a turn. So in our family, we had a bit of family loss, which affected us all quite a lot.
So this is on the back of COVID and all of that.
Yeah. So I had my uncle Liam. He passed away from a heart attack and died on his own. My grandmother, she passed away with Alzheimer's and dementia, and then my little cousin Arn, he had to go into hospital, and he never came out. Yeah. And he was only 17. So that terrible. One proper affected me.
Yeah. And I suppose a lot of patients can relate to that because there is a lot of patients. I mean, anxiety and depression, that's a big thing. I mean, nearly every patient I speak, I reckon 75% of my patients take some sort of antidepressant. So mentally, they're not necessarily in the right place. So it's very easy to slip mentally and find everything just piling on top of you.
And I think that's exactly it. I wouldn't, or I never went to the doctor, rightfully or wrongfully, about that. I never actually went to kind of discuss it or anything. Work was kind of my salvation, to be completely honest. But what was happening was I felt numb. I felt absolutely numb. I went to work. I'd done what I had to do. I still worked hard. Still, the hours I work. I still was working.
There was I never saw any change in you other than the physical appearance.
Exactly. So the physical appearance was how I was inside. It was a manifestation, basically. So I was numb, absolutely numb inside. And it got to a point, as I say, where I was at my absolute heaviest. Whenever I think it was something like 18 stone 11 was my highest point. And I just thought, I can't do this anymore, because I was having, which a lot of people didn't actually know, I was having probably on average, they weren't lasting very long, but whenever they came, they were coming hard home to me, like 20 panic attacks a day.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely battered day in, day out. My amazing wife had to put up with that.
Yeah.
But, we've got through the back end of that. And not only that, but what I realized was I was using my grief process as a validated excuse. Well, now whenever I truly look back on it, and you have to give people some, slack and things with some of this. But if someone had just got me by the shoulder and just said, Darren, you've put on a pile of weight.
Yeah.
Catch yourself on.
I must admit, I did think about that. And I did speak to a few of the other clients at Outclass.
Which is quite lovely, to be honest.
Yeah.
We're having them thoughts.
But you don't, do you? Because
society, Tony. We've discussed this many a time. If I was walking, if you're now talking to people, right, and you'll get it all the time, and I get it all the time. People will turn around and they'll openly give you an opinion on, you've done well, but maybe don't go any further.
I had that very thing yesterday. One of the nurses at work said, "Have you been losing weight?" And I said, yeah, I've lost about 10 kilos. Don't lose any more. It's not good for you.
But let's flip that.
Yeah.
Let's really, really flip that for a second. And if you turned around and looked someone straight in the eye like that nurse did to you, and turned around and went, you've put on a bit of weight.
Yeah, maybe you just couldn't do that.
Maybe you don't want to put on any more on. In actual fact, the first topic that we talked about is actually quite detrimental, because you've owned your health. Your health markers probably couldn't be any better at the moment. You've talked before about how vital you feel and things. So why would you want to go against that? That's great, right? But the other flip side of the coin is that if you don't interject into someone and go, like, I'm quite concerned for you. Like, you're actually putting on weight. You're walking towards cardiovascular disease, strokes, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, all this kind of stuff. That's what obesity leads to. That's where I was going towards.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you and the guys at the gym, I'm not saying you should have, but if you did, well, actually, I'm big and thick enough skin that I could have probably taken that. And do you know what? It would have hurt me right here.
Yeah.
It would have really made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And actually being that brutally honest, maybe that's the problem nowadays. Maybe it's because we aren't brutally honest. The people feel like they can get away with it.
Yeah.
And, I'm not into the whole body shaming people and all that kind of stuff of either end of the trajectory of that. But ultimately, there has to become a point you can't ignore if you're obese. It isn't healthy. It isn't. There's no way around it. And anyone that will tell you that are lying to you.
I mean, as a society, we're just exploding out. It's getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. We're quickly catching up. The United States probably have overtaken in some areas. Yeah. And there's two camps. There's either the super fit people or there's the overweight people, and there doesn't seem to be very much in between. No. It is quite difficult, really.
Going back to the point though about kind of my journey, because that's what you were asking originally. It's so it came to, well, going back a wee bit more to give you a bit more backstory. So in 2020, I went, and this was my first experience. So me and Neil Birchall at the gym, we went down to body development, right, down in Bath.
So this is your PT.
So
even the PT has a PT.
100%. Yeah. So this is my coach, right? So my first experience of going down to see Tom Crudgington was in 2020, and Neil said to me, he said, Darren, I think you're really gonna like Tom, and more from the standpoint he's a martial arts background kind of guy. He takes no nonsense, it's just straight talking. He is what it is, right? Brilliant. So I was like, right up my street. So anyway, I go there in 2020, bearing in mind as well, because the more that I've thought about this, I thought things do definitely not happen for a good reason, but people come into your life at certain times for certain reasons. So I go down to Bath 2 weeks before Aaron passed away. Right. So that was my first experience of meeting Tom. This was for a 1-day course, where we looked...
So you weren't overweight at that point? Then?
Well, I was
a little bit.
I was overweight, but I was...
You weren't at 5 stone.
I wasn't like morbidly obese. No. Yeah. So I was definitely carrying a bit, but I passed myself, Tony, at that stage, right? So I went down, and this was at the time when things were just starting to open up again with COVID, right? So it was still a bit weird, and nothing was like 100%. We were just getting back into the gym setting, and Tom would run this punch out course, right? So how he trained his from general pop right through the elite level athletes that he coaches. So me and Neil went down to this course. I was totally inspired by him, and Neil had done a few years ago like his mentorship that he runs. And anyway, he wasn't running this mentorship anymore at the time. This was in 2020. So then we come to November 22. Bearing in mind, it revolutionized how I delivered boxing training from a 1-day course. Like, that's all it was, 1 day. And I was like, wow. Just how he was getting us to move in and out of drills. I was like, this is the missing link, right? So anyway, I done this course. Now we're November 22. And I see, because I follow Body Development on their social media, and I seen that his mentorship come up. He said, I'm starting a mentorship in January. Who wants in? Now, bearing in mind, Tony, I was morbidly obese, whatever. But do you know whenever you just see something and you just go, that's what I need?
And how did you feel being morbidly obese as a PT going to a PT who's got other PTs likely? Is it other PTs that were there?
Absolutely.
So you're a morbidly obese PT. How did you deal with that?
So what's really, really interesting is that I was so at rock bottom that I didn't care anymore. So I would have probably said, if I was probably 3 stone lighter or 4 stone lighter in the past, the idea of going with my peer group at that time, just for my own confidence level, really, and actually kind of presenting who I was and what I did and blah, blah, it would have terrified me. It would have really made me feel uncomfortable. And definitely to someone like Tom, it would have been like, ugh. But I was in such a numb state where I was like, I need to try something here. I need to almost be shocked, or I need someone like Tom to turn around and go, what the hell are you doing? Get on with it. Now, that's not what happened. So whenever I signed up on the November mentorship, as in how you sign up with Tom, isn't this idea that I'm coming to do your course. It's, am I allowed to do your course? Because this guy, like, I can't even describe how lucky I am to be able to work with someone like him. And that luck then is passed on to my clients, because I'm learning from one of the best strength coaches in the world, in my opinion, and someone that isn't just book smart. He practically has examples of, like, he has his own case studies to the rationale and reason why he does certain training methods, not just because a PubMed review says it, because he has practical experience. So anyway, I'm digressing. So I get into this first January mentorship, and I'm faced with all these other PTs who, by far, I'm not even saying this lightly, I was the worst out of shape. Now, I'm not saying that I wasn't smart, right? Because, or I'm not saying I'm smart now, but I can hold my own in a room with my peers talking about, health and lifestyle. So in terms of the practical underpinning and all that kind of side, like the theoretical knowledge, talking about it, no problem. But then it came to the physicality of it.
Right.
One of the first things that we had to do was a thing called an in-body scanner. So it's a body fat analyzer.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh shit, here we go.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
so you don't want you don't want to step on the scales, do you? Oh
I was
my
almost
God,
like, will you step on them for me?
Yeah.
But anyway, I thought, right, I need to do this. So I was like, I showed up to this venue, and then I realized kind of what was happening, and it was almost like, well, I can't back out now, can I?
Yeah.
So I'm here. So I have to do it. So I have to be brave. So I go on these scales, and they're analyzing my body fat, and I get a printout. So we all go downstairs at this point to do kind of this review of this printout. And anyway, he chooses one of the guys, Joe, great guy. And he chooses Joe to do this kind of how he would consult with a client.
Yeah.
And all I remember thinking inside, and I'm telling you, that feeling there that I was saying that it would make me feel uncomfortable, that was definitely happening. And I remember saying unto myself, I hope, dear Jesus, he doesn't ask me to do this, right? Luckily, he only done Joe. And then we done various other things on the night, which I'll talk about in a second. But what happened was, it was a 2-day course. So that night then, I go back to my hotel, right? And I realized something had to be done at that point, because the thing that I was afraid of was the judgment, right? And then I asked myself the question, why the hell am I here? Why am I actually here? So what I did is I remembered every single question that Tom had asked Joe in that consult, and I wrote down answers. I wrote down answers for that, right? And I went to Tom first thing the next morning. I went up to him and went, can I do that consult with you? And he said, do you want to do it one-on-one, or do you want to do it in a group? And I said, I want to do it in one-on-one, but that's the reason why I have to do it in a group.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he smiled and he went, let's go.
Yeah.
So we went in front of everyone. He said, right, before we start, guys, Darren wants to do this. Boom, around in this group. And it was the most, I'll tell you, I'll remember this moment because it did literally change my life. Yeah. I was the most honest about who I was that I've ever been in my life. I literally just let it was almost like a counseling session. I literally just let it go. I didn't know these guys from Adam. So in my head, I was like, and how Darren of the past would have been. I would have been really bothered about that. I didn't. I thought this is a group of like-minded individuals who are actually going to get me to where I need to get, because they were supportive guys, right? Up until that point, none of them said a word about my weight. Tom turned around to them. I can't remember the exact phrase, but he turned around to them and said, looking at Darren, would you think he's a PT? Or would you and one of the guys, I think it was James, he turned around and he said, well, if he's not doing it himself, why would I take his advice? As in that's not that that's what he was saying that he would think. That would be the perspective of a client, which let's be honest, that's right. And I remember at the time eating that and thinking, this is awful. And Tom actually just turned around to me and said, right, so this is the way it is. Darren has, I think it was 41.8 kilograms of fat mass. He is morbidly obese. But that's where he is today. It's not where he's going to be in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months time, but that's where he is right now. And I owned it. Yeah. Tony.
And I suppose that you are describing accountability. And that is the one thing that you and the other trainers at O-Class have given me is accountability. So you feel like you're accountable to someone, and that is quite important in terms of your goals.
You have to own it.
Yeah.
If you don't own this process, and if you've got blinkers on, or you're thinking to yourself, I'm not as bad as I am, and all this kind of stuff, you're just kidding yourself.
Yeah.
Truthful. I know if I ever have a slip up with my diet in any way, right, I could tell my client about it. I'm not afraid of the repercussion of it, because that's not how I live my life.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to empathize with them and say, I get it. I completely understand your struggles, because I've been there. There's none of my clients that I currently train that were ever 18 stone 11.
Yeah.
So I've been worse than my clients.
Yeah.
And I went, and this is the big thing, with the amazing help of Tom Crudgenton, I went from being, basically, as I said, morbidly obese to an athletic body fat percentage in a year, in 11 months.
Unbelievable.
In 11 months.
It's a mindset and goals, isn't it?
But I was relentless about it. I took ownership of it.
Yeah.
And that's key.
And I suppose that kind of brings us into the modern way, which is potentially the lazy way of a little injection called Ozempic.
Okay.
Where so Ozempic, for those who don't know, is a glucagon-like peptide that basically was used in diabetes, and it's used often in diabetes to increase the amount of insulin, reduce the amount of glucagon, so you reduce your blood sugar in a sense. But it has this effect of slowing the emptying of the stomach, and also tells your brain that you're fuller. So it's a bit like bariatric surgery in terms of it can, you feel fuller, so you eat less. But it's not, it does have its problems because, like with bariatric surgery, if someone has a band on a stomach or something like that, they can suck a lot of calories through a straw. They can take a lot of calories in, and they can beat the system in a way and still put weight on. As a PT, what is your take on something like Ozempic? I mean, we are thinking of using this in our clinic because we've got an endocrinologist, but we would be very much an endocrinologist, doctor-driven service, as opposed to you can just buy it online and you can sell your statistics and lie about them, so you'll get a prescription or however you do it. But what's your take on it as a PT?
So, considering the journey that I've been on, right, and I haven't taken any kind of semaglutide, that it is, right. So the way that I kind of look at it is that, you don't have to do that. And it kind of comes back to the point that I'd make with what I said earlier about like 6-minute abs and all this kind of pipeline dream stuff that people are being sold, right? So the way that I see it, and the way that people are kind of going away from in society, is they don't want it to be hard work. They want it to be, they want an easy, quick fix. The problem that I see, right, is that whenever we actually look at what, that particular drug is used for, it's been shown to be effective for, or may be shown to be effective for people to manage their blood sugar levels with type 2 diabetes. Yeah. As far as the science goes with fat loss, it's not that conclusive. And not only that, but whenever you're looking at taking anything like this, what are the risk factors? Yeah. And whenever you look at the risk factors, the extensive ones, not obviously, it's like all drugs, not everyone's going to get the same level of risk, or that they're actually going to feel that. But what I would definitely say, like you said with your endocrinologist, first and foremost, that medication. I read something recently that was in a newspaper article that type 2 diabetics that a doctor was looking to actually prescribe the medication couldn't actually prescribe it because of it being sold privately. That's right. Because
the pharmacists are running short on it, which is a big problem because, like I say, it's becoming an easy fix for people. But what we'll probably end up with is thinner, really unhealthy people because they're just using that as a substitute.
What's the research show, Tony, whenever you come off the medication? When you come off the medication without the interaction,
you're not thinking about the bigger picture. Yeah.
Without the interaction of diet and exercise, which is exactly what it says alongside one of these drugs. It doesn't say take this in happy days. It actually says take this in conjunction with. Now, I'm not validating it in any stretch of the imagination, but I definitely wouldn't be taking anything like that unless I was medically supervised. Yeah, because I think it's a drug that can have counteraction with maybe other medication people are taking or whatever. So you definitely need someone that has a thorough understanding of this, far more than even that I do, to be anywhere near advising that. But secondly, it goes just simply back to an honest truth. Have you explored changing your lifestyle enough that if you were to come off Ozempic at some point, would you not just revert back? Yeah. And this is the thing. Some of the research is showing that the people that are coming off it are literally just going back to normal.
And there should be no surprise there.
Obviously,
it's the same as anything.
But the thing is there hasn't been an intervention in place that's actually substantial enough to create lifestyle change. Going back to what I was saying before about me and my make the weight for my competitions, I haven't just lost. What is it like? I think it's up. From my very, very start, I've lost something like 37 kilo now. I haven't put that on in that entire time. We're talking, what are we, like a year and a half over of doing this now. And in the past, my make the weight strategies were for a maximum of 16 weeks, right? Whereas now I'm just living like this. I don't feel deprived. I don't feel like anything. I feel excellent. My energy is amazing. We talked, way back about, they're not even in this today, but way back, like things that I was suffering from was chronic lower back pain, and my right knee was constantly giving me jip.
That's the patients that we see.
But if you think about it, right, it'd be very, very easy, and this isn't to do you out of a job,
No,
but it would have been.
You'll never do that.
No, I'll try not to. But it would be so much easier for me to go, I've got a bad knee, I've got a bad back, I need to go to someone to sort it. But because of my background, I realized that the weight that my body that was trying to carry, my body wasn't strong enough for that. So in essence, by losing the weight, all those, like, I don't have a bad knee, I don't have a bad back, I'm absolutely fine, because there's far less physical stressors put in my body.
And I suppose
inflammation,
from our point of view, that will help our patients to get better outcomes.
100%.
Because it's part of the overall. I mean, it's very easy to have a knee replaced, but if you have a knee replaced and you're 20 stone, you're going to do well with that knee if you're 12 stone.
Yeah. It's multifaceted, isn't it? Yeah. Like, I've talked to you about this in the past. The approach should always be like interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. Like, you're the surgeon, then you've got, the physiotherapist, then you've got the PT, that approach to recovery has to be gold standard, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Seeing it through to the end has to be, rather than just fix and go. It's like, but life begins after that for that person again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which I think, you talk very well about that, and how, that can impact the patients in a really, really positive way. But it is you as the surgeon, it is you looking at that from, but what other information can I give that person?
Yeah.
That, because sometimes being told the not so nice thing is actually what we need. Now, not everyone, but it didn't do my personality type any wrong. Someone turn around to me and going, Darren, you need to make a change.
Yeah.
Because I was ready for it.
Yeah.
And you can't force anyone into this.
No, you can't.
So, and I think, from my perspective, I definitely get a lot more buy-in from my clients now. And Tom, my coach, is asking this all the time, from what I'm doing, because, fat loss and things is great, right? It's fab, but it's what it's made me able to do with my life. Like last year, part of my fat loss journey was me and my wife were actually going dancing every week as well.
Yes.
So, and I got a lot of stick for that, but I loved every second of doing that. It was so much fun. And if I wasn't in a position where I was getting myself well again, well, then I wouldn't have been bothered to do it. And secondly, because I didn't feel like I was worth anything to do that type of stuff. Yeah. Whereas that was making me feel good. That was all part of my process of like working myself out. And that goes back to that for some people would be really, really intense exercise, right? Yeah. For me, that was probably more my NEAT. That was probably just general movement. Yeah. Probably 4 or 5 hours a week that I was doing of that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Finding things that you really like and just getting up and moving more. Giving someone that positive outlook massively impacts it.
So in terms of, getting hold of you work at Outclass Fitness, you do PT, you do some video online. So people, if people listen to this and think, what, I want to engage more in this, I want to get some advice from you, how is the best way to contact you?
Well, we can put something on here regarding that. That's not a problem at all. On my Facebook, typically Darren Worrall, my Facebook that way. They can have access to my email address, my business card, all that kind of stuff. But mainly, if they left a comment on the podcast itself, any way they want. But don't be afraid to reach out. But obviously, make sure that you want to make a change. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Or even if you're not ready for a change, reach out, and you never know. There's a lot that can be had from a discussion. A simple chat with someone where there's no pressure on anything can make a really positive outcome to someone.
Huge difference. Well, thanks very much, Darren. That's very honest of you and a fascinating journey into the fitness world and your own personal goals. So thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. No worries.